Very fortunately, I had the opportunity of going into therapy myself, and basically I did it out of a kind of moral obligation because I was doing therapy on people. Actually, at that stage I was a behavior therapist, but I was doing therapy on people, but I didn't really believe it really worked. But I felt I had this moral obligation to try it for myself, so I figured I would go in for a few weeks and just see what it was like, and then who knows. Well, fortunately, I had the extraordinary good fortune to go into therapy with Jim Bugental, one of the major humanistic existential therapists. And I'll just say that I recently did a psychotherapy video on transpersonal psychology for APA. And John Carlson was the host, and he's interviewed hundreds of people doing various kinds of therapy. And he said, of all the people I've ever seen and worked with, Jim Bugental was the most remarkable. So I had the incredible good fortune of ending up in therapy with this man. And it took a little more than the couple of weeks I'd planned on. But after 2 years, I staggered out of there with my whole worldview shattered. With Jim's help, I discovered that there was an inner universe as vast and mysterious as the outer, which I had had no idea even existed. I felt like I had spent my entire life living on the top 6 inches of a wave on top of an ocean I didn't even know existed. Yet here was a veritable internal universe of thoughts, of images, of feelings, of imaginal realms, of possibilities, of sources of wisdom that I hadn't even known existed. And from this new perspective, as I looked around at the culture, it seemed like our culture was totally asleep, that no one else seemed to be aware of this either. So it was literally like a state of shock. How could I have spent my life so utterly unaware of something so unbelievably important? So I dove into all the various kind of isms that California has to offer, TA, TM, Eureka, EST, you name it, I did it. Practically every weekend was spent in a workshop of some kind. And gradually I found myself orienting towards spiritual practices and groups, which puzzled me mightily because I knew that religion was kind of the opiate of the masses, and spirituality was a relic of archaic thinking, and if so, what the hell was I doing getting something out of this stuff? And then I really puzzled over this, and then there was literally one moment which changed my life. One moment where I was walking to the bathroom to wash up for dinner, and I was crossing the living room, and in mid-step I had this recognition that hidden behind the conventional rituals of religion was a contemplative core which was constituted of a technology, a mind-training set of practices for cultivating the same states of mind that the founders had realized. And that this spiritual technology was accompanied by roadmaps, by psychologies and philosophies which described the worldviews and insights and discoveries that emerged as one did these practices. And that these traditions contained a gold mine, a reservoir of humankind's deepest accumulated wisdom, but that I'd been utterly blind to it. That moment changed my life. I dove into contemplative practices. I did some long retreats. And the day after I got tenure at the University of California, I applied for a year's leave of absence to go meditate in Asia. Disappeared off to Burma and practiced there. And eventually I was invited to go to the Menninger Conference on voluntary control of internal states. Which I thought would be an interesting conference, and actually it was, because that's where I met my wife, Frances Fawn. But there was a little problem, in as much as the conference started the day after my psychiatry board exams, and I spent the entire 6 months up till then holed away studying, and then I did the exams, caught a flight out overnight, arrived at this conference, and immediately became massively depressed. So I I found a hut on the outskirts of this conference center, and I broke into it, and I kind of hid away there and tried to get my head back for most of the conference. On the final day of the conference, I finally screwed up my courage and stood up and said something. And at the back of the room, this woman stood up and said, "I totally disagree." Who could resist? So we got together, and I guess we kind of patched up our differences because eventually we got married. And then a few weeks later, I went to a humanistic psychology conference, and the keynote speaker was some guy by the name of Jim Fadiman. And Jim gave what I now know is one of his standard, absolutely brilliant, side-splittingly funny talks. And I remember sitting in that audience and having this thought arise, I've got to learn to do public speaking. I see the impact you can have. And you'll get to assess tonight whether or not I was successful at that. But Jim Fadiman that evening changed my life because I realized there was an art form here and I had to begin to learn it.